it's Friday, and that means Sci Friday on SkyWatch TV. Welcome. I'm Derek Gilbert. With me in studio is my best friend, the author of Ebola and the Fourth Horseman of the Apocalypse, and the SkyWatch TV science editor, my wife, Sharon K. Gilbert.
Hi, honey. How are you?
I'm doing fine, sweetheart.
I have dark hair.
Well, it's a good thing.
I woke up one day
scientifically
crazy. Well, anyway, I just thought I'd mention it because I know many people are going to go, what happened to your silvery white hair? Well, got tired of it. That's how life is. But
no worries.
There's lots to talk about, and you mentioned the book that I wrote last year. Ebola's back in the news because a nurse in Scotland who was sick last December, critically ill and recovered, is now sick again. And what we're seeing in the news is that the doctors seem to think that the Ebola that had gone dormant in some of her tissues has reactivated.
Wow. So even though it appeared as though she survived, it's reactivated and she is now, you say, critically ill again?
Well, it looks, she is critically ill, and they believe that it's because of the virus. The interesting thing about Ebola that researchers have figured out now is that it remains viable, just sort of sleeping, you might say, in tissues like the eye and in sexual reproduction organs, in the testes, places like that. It can be spread in Africa and West Africa. There are definitely cases where a man who has recovered from the disease has transmitted Ebola to a female partner, and she has become ill. In fact, a few have died. So it is not going away.
Well, that's disturbing news and tragic for Pauline, what's her name? Cafferty?
Cafferty.
Yeah. Tragic for her, but it also is kind of eye-opening for researchers who've been studying this. How aware of this latency or resilience of the virus was known to science?
They're just now figuring it out. The past eruptions of Ebola in Eastern Africa and Central Africa, essentially it was put out the fire and then leave. So long-term, after the fact, research wasn't done. But because there were labs in place already in West Africa that were studying Marburg and Ebola, I suspect that these scientists have stayed behind so that they can sort of right after the effect do research on what happens to people who have survived. They're finding that this virus remains in these tissues for at least 9 months. Now, it could be we're going to find out that it's longer, because originally it was for 3 months, then 6 months, then 9. And I think it's simply however long past the recovery date of the person involved, they're still finding it. So I suspect that we're going to learn a whole lot more about the Ebola virus in the next year or two.
We've not heard the last of this yet. No.
There's
some events that have taken place recently, some conferences that lay people like myself wouldn't necessarily pay attention to, except that they do relate to how we view the world around us, which of course relates to how we as Christians react to the world. Because
very much so.
Yeah.
And one was in St. Louis, and I wish we'd known about it. We would have gone.
Yeah. St. Louis is relatively close to where we are here in the Ozarks. I mean, it's within an easy day drive. But
and our daughter's there.
Exactly. So it would have been a nice excuse to get up and see her as well. But the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and we're reading an excellent book on this right now, by the way, and I think both of us would recommend the book, The Pentagon's Brain, by investigative journalist Annie Jacobson. It's a history of DARPA.
Her.
Yeah, and by the way, my podcast site, I've got a 1-hour interview with Annie Jacobson about some of the work that DARPA is doing. If you'd like to hear that interview, you can log on to my podcast site, which is vftb.net. DARPA had a conference in St. Louis. What were the topics of conversation, and which ones should we pay attention to?
Well, it was called the Wait What? A Future Technology Forum.
I say that a lot when I read about science.
And the speakers who were there were discussing things like the legal and ethical implications of developing tech. We've talked about that a number of times on our podcast, and also a couple of times on here. The Secretary of Defense, Ash Carter, who also happens to be a physicist, was also there. And of course, as Secretary of Defense, he is technically the head guy for DARPA. Although he's head guy, because they always have a director. There was someone there talking about optogenetics. Carl Dieselroth was there, and optogenetics is a way to genetically alter a neuron that allows for a light frequency beam to switch that neuron on and off. So optogenetics is a big field right now.
So certain light frequencies can basically trigger genetic responses in the brain or throughout the entire body or what?
Well, whatever that neuron is that they have altered, it has to have a receptor for that light. So that's adding a gene or altering a gene in a neuron. And the neurons in our brains have different jobs. It may be one that causes you to remember something. It may be one that makes you smell a certain smell. It may be one that makes you turn right or left or move forward or stop.
Intriguing. And
But along that same thing, connected to that, did you see the story, and we'll go on to the other conference here in a minute, did you see the story about the magnets that have been used to change your thinking?
That's really bizarre. Scientists believe that by subjecting the brain to targeted electromagnetic pulses, you can change how you feel about certain things. But of course, the way the story was reported by the Express in the UK, the lead paragraph is very telling in the message that they want to send. A bizarre experiment claims to be able to make Christians no longer believe in God and make Britons open their arms to migrants. In other words, to change your opinion on things depending on where they hit the, what spots in the brain they hit with these powerful magnets.
Well, and I tried to find the original research. All I could find was the abstract, unless, of course, I wanted to pay hundreds of dollars to actually subscribe to the journal that it was published in. It's an Oxford journal. Eventually, it will be made public domain, so I can read it then. But in the meantime, what little was at the abstract, there is an indication that you can influence thinking through these magnets. I really do not, in any way, shape, or form, believe that a genuine Christian is going to deny Christ simply because you've used magnets on his or her brain. But the research article must have language in it that allowed the mainstream media who are reporting on it the last few days to run wild with the story. And that often happens when you have a science journalist who goes in and finds something that is sexy, and I'm going to lead with that.
Right, because you need a hook in order to draw
You
people
do,
in.
yeah.
It's basic marketing and basic communication technique. But the thing I thought was interesting about this, they said that belief in God in this experiment was reduced by a third, while participants became about 30% less bothered by immigrants. I think what you're talking about here are people who are swayed by how they feel about God.
I think that's how they feel at the moment.
Yes.
It could be that the magnets were actually affecting some sort of neurotransmitters in a way that made you feel better at the moment.
Yes.
Because if you were asked a question, how do you feel about immigration? Do you approve of immigrants coming into Europe? Because usually you have to have a yes or no answer.
Right.
And well, no, I hate it. That may be your response because you're really feeling crabby at the moment. But if they can find a way to make you feel really, really great, well, I don't know, it might not be a problem.
Exactly.
And it's fuzzy science. Let's put it that way.
Exactly right. As Christians, there are days when we're going to feel less well than others. There are some days we're going to feel absolutely great, very close to God, very connected to God. But there are days where we're going to feel like we're kind of walking alone, not recognizing, to borrow that old story, that single set of footprints in the sand is actually Jesus carrying you on his back when you're really at your lowest point. How we feel doesn't affect history.
No.
And we know that Christ died in accordance with the scriptures for our sins, was buried, rose again on the third day in accordance with the scriptures. That doesn't change depending how I feel.
Right.
And sadly, I suspect the people whose opinions of God were changed in this study were those who base their belief in God on how they feel at any given moment. Because we've come to a point in history where feelings are far more important than actual facts, doctrines, beliefs, and creeds.
Right.
Anyway, this is a story, and we'll see stories like this from time to time about how science, and of course the implication then is that it's only because our brains were wired a certain way that we believe in God. We sort of created God as a defense mechanism to overcome our fear of death.
And that's why I'm glad you brought that up, because I think a lot of times we see stories like this in the news because we are being programmed to believe a lie.
Right, exactly right. And quite often that's why we will refer to stories, and even during the regular daily news updates, we refer to stories from the major media, not because we necessarily, we don't believe everything we hear in the major media,
No, we do
but
not.
oftentimes we report it because it's what we we want you to be aware of what the media wants us to think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is one of those examples.
Yeah. Well, the other conference you found online, so
Yeah,
talk a little bit.
well, this is one that...
The Cosmists?
yes, a conference by a group called the Cosmists, and now I need to find it. Here it is. Cosmism.com is the website. Cosmism is a belief system that originated about 100 years ago in Russia, and it is essentially one of the well springs from which flows the modern transhumanist movement. The main difference in the transhumanists and the Cosmists is that the Cosmists believe that ultimately, someday, all humans will be resurrected, well, which we as Christians do, and that we will basically spread out into the galaxy in ethereal bodies to populate the galaxy, the universe, actually.
Well, it's all good as far as cosmists are
yes,
concerned.
and we will be what we call radiant humanity, a perfect society of highly moral and superconscious beings.
This
and
is similar
these guys,
to Teilhard de Chardin.
It's very much like Teilhard de Chardin. In fact, Teilhard de Chardin, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, if you've not heard him before, he is the Jesuit priest, died in the early 60s, who was a very interesting fellow. He was an archaeologist by training, but he was a philosopher by nature. And he had some very creative ways of trying to bend Scripture to fit his belief in evolution. And he believes that all of creation, not just humanity, are evolving into a more conscious, sentient state. So all the matter around us is becoming sentient, and at some point we will all come together in what he called the omega point, which is when we become one with the universe, in a sense. It's very
sort
Eastern.
of like the singularity.
Right.
Sort of.
Well, it's very much like the singularity. The main difference is that Teilhard believed it was going to happen naturally, and the transhumanists, the Kurzweil singularitarians, believe it's going to happen through technology.
And
the
they
Cosmists,
really do call themselves singularitarians.
yes, singularitarians. And the Cosmists essentially were the group of Russians before that came before Teilhard de Chardin. He kind of built on their work, and then Dr. Kurzweil, I think, adopted the ideas of Teilhard for his own self. So again, the Cosmists met this past weekend and had a very interesting group of speakers who included James Hughes, who will be featured in the forthcoming documentary Inhuman from SkyWatchTV and Defender Films. He is the executive chairman of the Institute for Emerging Ethical Technologies, IEET.
IEET.
Right, former chairman of the World Transhumanist Association, which is now called Humanity Plus. So this is not a group of slouches. I mean, they've got guys connected to Columbia University, Yale, and these are intellectual giants, really, who are getting together, who are trying to find ways to use technology to achieve this dream of somehow transcending the limits of our biology. Now, as Christians, we believe we are going to someday transcend the limits of our biology when we are resurrected into glorified bodies. We've got the best deal going because the promise was made and assured by the resurrected Jesus Christ, who prophesied his death and resurrection, and then it happened. Sadly, these folks are trying to fabricate a cheap copy.
Yeah. Well, they don't believe in God. They don't believe in anything outside themselves other than the possibility of becoming God.
And sadly, because it is so, because there is a lot of money behind this and some very powerful institutions and some very, very intelligent men and women who are part of this movement, it is something that we as Christians need to address, hence the film forthcoming, which is in the final editing stages as we record this.
It is.
And why Tom Horn and others have been talking about this. Chuck Missler, you and I have been talking about this for several years, but Tom was really early in catching and understanding the implications of where the transhumanist movement was leading.
Was Dr. Randall Kanner
Yes,
there?
yes.
The reason I ask that is because we also, you and I talked about his website and his dream at carboncopies.org.
Right.
He wants to do full brain emulations in order to reverse engineer the mind. This is a big dream of men like Kurzweil who want to figure out exactly what makes us tick and recreate that in software.
Yeah. It's what he calls a substrate-independent minds, or SIMS, which is a perfect acronym for this.
Yes.
They're trying to simulate the human mind so they can then somehow replicate the patterns, the electrical activity inside our minds in some sort of a computer program, and then upload it into a different substrate, a computer processor of some sort, essentially to upload us into the matrix, and we become virtually immortal inside of a cosmic mainframe.
Well, you and I have talked about this before, and that is the claim that we are already in the matrix. We are in a simulation. It's an ancestor simulation
Yes.
that has been created for those humans who refuse to upgrade in the future. Therefore, the future cyborgs or, Artilects or whatever they are have decided, okay, we'll take those meat sacks and we'll put them into this. We'll make them think that they're still alive and still relevant, and we'll let them believe in their God if they want to. That's a dangerous lie.
Yes.
If our young people, if our kids and our grandkids start to believe that, they will believe that free will doesn't exist.
Right.
Whatever you've been programmed to do, that's okay.
Yeah. And that is the message that we're being sent through stories like this one about the scientists being able to change your belief in God through magnets.
Yeah, exactly.
We have no free will. We're just programmed this way.
Yeah.
Interestingly, and I think we've talked about this once before, I just want to mention this though, because there are times when this sounds so crazy that you just shake your head and say, no rational person can believe this. But again, we have to stress that some of the people behind this movement, such as Dr. Raymond Kurzweil, is being backed by the likes of Autodesk, the manufacturers of creators
Google.
of CAD software, Google, which is the most powerful tech company on the planet, tied in pretty tightly with the National Security Agency. Dr. Kurzweil is the director of engineering, and they have literally spent billions of dollars over the last 2.5 years acquiring companies engaging in artificial intelligence research, neural network research, robotics research, and now even genetics. Why? Because they want to live forever, and they don't think there's a way to do it other than through technology.
Yeah, it's sad.
But there is a group who believe that as part of this simulation, that we can't talk about the simulation because there's a chance that if we are living in a simulation created by our distant descendants who have basically created us in their past to see how we might live inside
I know, it's a paradox, actually.
It is a paradox. It's called Roko's basilisk, R-O-K-O. You could Google this, I would suggest, or maybe use a different search engine. Roko's basilisk, because the idea is that if we talk about this future descendant creating or artificial intelligence that we might create, coming back and those who don't get on board the program to help create this artificial intelligence, the Luddites, like us, that somehow this Terminator from the future will come back to the past to try to wipe us out to make sure that we create it. In other words, it'll try to rearrange its own past to ensure its own survival. And there are some very intelligent people in the fields of artificial intelligence and computer technology who really freak out about this because they think that somehow everything that goes wrong in their life is being controlled by a distant descendant, some future artificial intelligence that's messing with their careers, messing with their home lives, messing with them to prevent them from getting in the way of its own creation. It's nuts.
It is nuts. It is nuts. But it reminds me of the movie The Ring.
Yes.
Once you watch the video, you can't go back. You have to make somebody else watch it. Well, this is sort of like that, in that once you look, you're stuck. You're doomed forever once you look.
Yeah, and there was an online forum, and I forget what the forum is right now, but again, run by a gentleman who's a leading, very influential man in the transhumanist movement, and they actually banned from this forum any mention of this paradox, the Roko's basilisk paradox, because he's afraid that it might lead to their own destruction. So
when Jesus Christ is our Savior, we have nothing to fear.
That's right.
Nothing, nada, not a thing in this world, not a thing in the future, nothing ever. His blood covers you, covers all our sins, and we have, praise God, we get to look forward to his return. And I think one of the last things I want to talk about is a story that came out the last few days. It's a repeat of an occurrence that happened a few years ago in China, the story of the ghost cities. A few years ago in China, there were people who suddenly were standing on a bridge by a river, and suddenly they saw a ghost city in the sky. And there were photographs taken at the time. It was all over the news, all over the world. And a few days ago, it happened again.
Wow.
And along with that, there have been ghost UFOs that are appearing in South America, and just recently, I think, in India. And these are massive. They're almost transparent, sort of like they're sublimating.
Similar to the ones that showed up in the movie, the M. Night Shyamalan movie, Signs.
Very much. Well, the ones in Signs you couldn't see at all.
Right,
you could see the effect of the birds hitting them.
the force field or
but
whatever.
They look sort of like the ones, these UFOs look sort of like the ones from Independence Day. They're gigantic, mothership kind of UFOs, but they are semi or almost totally transparent. You can just barely see them. So my question is, are these stories being spun out there because we are to believe that somehow it's a glitch in the program?
The Matrix, yes.
Yes. Or is someone playing around with some holographic technology that is being tested here and there?
Ah, yes.
Because the day will come when a false Antichrist will need to make it appear as if he has returned from heaven on his white horse with a cloud of witnesses.
Ah, yes.
And all eyes will see Jesus Christ when he returns at the end of the tribulation period. Everyone. That's the real Christ. So if you're going to fake it, you have to do that too.
Project Bluebeam.
Come at the end of a major war. Yes, Project Bluebeam is one of the those that get talked about in the various fora that are out there. But I do believe that, well, gosh, was it a few years ago that we saw Michael Jackson in a hologram on the MTV Awards?
Yeah.
It looked so real, and you were able to videograph it with the camera, able to take pictures on your iPhone or other camera with it. The fact that we're seeing these mirages or ghosts in the sky, I think may be due to some science that's being tested.
That could very well be. There is a new technology that has shown some promise at being able to bend light waves around an object in order to give it the appearance of being invisible.
Yes.
But also, within the last year, Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan made an appearance at a political rally as a hologram.
Oh, that's right, he did.
Yeah.
That's right.
And one of the biggest pop stars in Japan right now happens to be a hologram. So the technology is there. How it will be used, we don't know, but don't be fooled. Because again, if you don't see Christ returning with his feet in the clouds at the head of a heavenly army, then it's not him. As you mentioned earlier, we as Christians have nothing to be afraid of. We're not given a spirit of fear, and greater is he that is in us than he that is in the world. As we approach Halloween, we have a lot of monsters, some cultural tropes that come out, are trotted out every year: vampires, werewolves, ghosts, demons, witches, and so forth. If you'd like a Christian response to those Halloween ghoulies, God's Ghostbusters is a book that can help. It contains essays from a number of writers like Chuck Missler. By the way, the essay from Chuck Missler, you remember the talk that he gave on Sci Friday a couple of weeks ago about the virtual reality in which we're living? He gives a summary of that as the opening chapter in this book.
Oh,
so if you
that's
saw
worth
that,
the book right there.
Yes, and during the month of October, this is our gift to you for your donation of any size to SkyWatch TV. So to get yourself a copy of this book, again, you name the price. Instructions on how to donate posted at skywatchtv.com. Well, there's so much more we could talk about. We could do a full hour on this, but that's, science is fascinating, and I think one thing we need to remind people is that we're not anti-science.
Hardly. I mean, that's what I majored in. I love science, but it's a two-edged sword. It can be used against us.
Right, exactly right, and that's why we do this program. And we thank you for watching as we keep watch. For Sharon Gilbert, I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is SkyWatch TV.
Coming exclusively from SkyWatch TV for a very limited time starting November 17th, 2015. When you purchase the new documentary film Inhuman and the companion book Dead Pets Don't Lie from SkyWatch TV, you'll receive the largest giveaway in SkyWatch TV history. An unprecedented $300 in free books, audio sets, and DVDs to add to your library or to give away as gifts during this holiday season. Included in this limited time giveaway are never before offered free audio sets. Over 30 hours of the most sought after interviews in history with global experts combined on a special 2-disc volume set discussing the unfolding genetic Armageddon now underway and what you need to know to survive the future. Featuring Something Transhumanism This Way Comes, The Coming Replacement Humans, The Days of Noah, The Coming Zombie Apocalypse, Conspiracy Theory, Psychotronic Warfare, Also, for a very limited time, in addition to the never-before-offered free best-selling audio sets, if you order before this special offer expires, you'll also receive the multi-part SkyWatch TV special investigative report on Inhuman the documentary and Dead Pets Don't Lie, the award-winning book Forbidden Gates, Pandemonium's Engine, the best-selling DVD by dog behavior expert Joe Artis, The Natural Dog Training Method, the breakthrough book for pet enthusiasts everywhere, Do Our Pets Go to Heaven? 2 additional mystery books with a $40 value. And if you're one of the first 3,000 customers to place your order during this limited time offer, you will also receive, absolutely free, the groundbreaking WorldNet daily film, The Last Pope, featuring Tom Horn. Place your order beginning November 17th, 2015. Altogether, the never-before-offered free 6 full audio series on a 2-disc volume set plus the 5 free books and 2 additional DVDs total an astounding $300 giveaway to add to your library or to give away as gifts during this holiday season. So it's urgent that beginning November 17th, 2015, you order the new documentary film Inhuman and the companion book Dead Pets Don't Lie for only $39.95 to also receive the largest giveaway in SkyWatch TV history. But please understand this offer will end without notification and is on a first-come, first-served basis starting November 17th. So be sure to visit SkyWatchTV.com to follow the countdown to the greatest giveaway in SkyWatch TV history. Order the new documentary film Inhuman and the companion book Dead Pets Don't Lie for only $39.95 to also receive the largest giveaway in SkyWatch TV history.